Those of you who are getting signed on, we're going to give it just a couple minutes for folks to join us before we get underway here. The tornado sirens are sounding in Nebraska for our Severe Weather Awareness Week. Don't know where everybody else is or if you're experiencing the same thing. So if you hear that in the background, it's just a Midwestern thing.
Hey, Kent, Dan Maria Vatry here.
Hi, Dan. Glad you're with us.
Happy Wednesday, I guess it is.
Yeah. What state are you in today, Dan?
Well, for the last year, I've been in my home state of Minnesota.
Ah.
I've shared the office space with the Minnesota Trucking Association for 20 years or more, and then just a couple years ago, they wanted to move, and I wasn't going to move in the direction they were moving. So
I see. Well, John Hoslodden and his crew are good company to be in. So.
Oh yeah. He lives way out in the boonies and wanted to move a little bit closer. And we're over more on the east side of things, my staff and I, so we just thought we'll set up our own office. In fact, that's what Rebecca just did with her crew in Atlanta. They just left Ed Kroll and opened up some new offices.
No, I didn't know that. What is it, 11:02? We'll give it one more minute, folks who are signing on. We're about a little more than halfway to the number of people who registered here that have logged on, so we'll give them another minute or so. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started, folks. There will be some more join us, I believe, as we get going here, but I want to be super respectful of everybody's time. We're going to do our best to keep this to the half hour that we laid out when we sent the email out and took in the registrations. So let's get started. Good morning. My name is Kent Grisham, for those of you who I have not met. I'm president here at the Nebraska Trucking Association. And we started out on this journey here just not too long ago with a market research project that would help us to understand the things that high schoolers in particular need to hear from the trucking industry in order to make trucking in general, and in particular truck driving, a career choice. Of course, it all has to do with the driver shortage.
Kent, I can't hear you right now.
Thank you for that. Can you all hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All right, super. Well, I've been chatting away here. I'm not sure what you heard and what you didn't, so I'm going to start over. Sorry, folks. We've got still some that are signing on, but we're going to be respectful of your time and proceed forward. And just wish you a good morning. I'm Kent Grisham, president of the Nebraska Trucking Association. Glad to be with you. Glad that you've decided to look into this project that we have done. For the last, I guess we started on this late 2020, the idea of a market research project looking into what Nebraska high schoolers need to hear from the trucking industry in order to help the industry attract them in general, but also in particular to truck driving careers. And of course, this starts with the problem that we all know is number one on the hearts and minds of everybody in the trucking industry, and that is the driver shortage. So we worked with ATRI to kind of help guide how we would develop this market research project with that in mind. We're glad to have Dan Murray here from ATRI with us today. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning, Kent. We are glad to be here. This is one of the single biggest issues in the industry. I would describe it not even as an issue, but a crisis. So the work you're doing in this area is very, very important to everybody in the country, really.
We're not going to really get into a lot of the stats this morning, Dan, mostly because the audience that we have here with us today, we're all state trucking associations. We all participate in the various surveys. We read the transport topics. We know what our members are telling us. As we look at how the topic has been number one for the last 4 years for sure in the annual ATRI Top 10 Issues survey, are we seeing any changes in terms of why? Are there particular demographics? Are there particular trends besides just the need to replace retiring drivers that we're seeing come out of the data?
Well, we do know that quite a few quote unquote entry level drivers really are not in that 21 to 25, but almost pursuing a second career in the 30 to 40-year-old range. So that has to be one of our targets. Entry level no longer just means young or veteran. So that's certainly one of the, call it, target markets we're all active. We're very, very excited about the possibility that we could get more women drivers in. They represent, in some instances, over 50% of the U.S. workforce, but in the trucking industry, they're only about 8% of all drivers out there. So it's a big opportunity, but we know their issues are oftentimes unique. Lighting, security, safety, ergonomics, they don't have the same body shape and structure as men. So we're pursuing all of those. And I was particularly excited to see your focus group demographics were over 60% female. So that gives us a lot of extra insight into what their needs are.
We kind of went into this, and I don't know if ATRI has any data that helps drive this part of the conversation. We went into this saying, as an industry, we've been focusing quite a bit of energy on opening up the job market to the 18 to 20-year-old professional driver. Right. We have pilot programs. We're talking about it on Capitol Hill a lot. We're talking to regulators about it a lot. My point, and kind of what got us going down this road, is, okay, let's say, for example, we get the regulatory changes that we're asking for, and the interstate driving profession is now opened up to 18-year-olds. Now what? Because there's a lot more that would have to be done that would make the career field viable, right, and would make them an actual part of the solution to the driver shortage.
Yeah, we already know that, a truck driver and the truck driver job description is unique. It's not for everybody. It's certainly not for somebody who's pursuing a bachelor's or master's degree per se, although we certainly have those in our driving population. But it gets really interesting and unique when you get to the 18 to 20, because they're still sort of in their formative years. They're still trying to understand what they want. There's even quite a bit of, call it, physiological research saying that at 18 to 20, you may not be as safe as a 40-year-old with 10 years of experience. So as you know, Kent, ATRI is now in its phase 2 of developing an assessment tool to identify psychological attributes of 18 to 20-year-olds to say, where do they map to mature thinking, aversion to, spontaneity, and essentially, can we find 18 to 20-year-old drivers that look as safe on paper and behind the wheel as a veteran driver? And indicators are that we can. So once you find the 18 to 20-year-olds who are interested, then we have the assessment tool to do that last level of screening to make sure, from a safety standpoint, they're the right fit for the right job.
Right. But as you just said, we got to get them interested first. And that's where we wanted to take this project up, because it's going to take us a while to develop the kind of marketing materials and get the whole industry to embrace the idea that we got to go after these high schoolers in the first place.
That's right. If they're not interested, they won't apply. If they don't apply, they can't even be assessed for safety. So we're a couple steps behind you on the safety analysis. Got to get them in the door. Absolutely.
Yeah. So what we've done moving forward now, we've asked these questions. What if 4 years ago, when the issue became the #1 issue on the ATRI survey, we actually were out there convincing high schoolers that trucking is a great career? Would it have worked to bring us more drivers today? Would the driver shortage look different today? And would we have boosted the image? And okay, we didn't do that 4 years ago, so what if we start doing that now? I did some very unscientific research as part of this, and I just kind of started Googling what you found if you went out there looking at the age of truck drivers. And I found the fact, it's startling to me how much our industry is telling the 18 to 20-year-olds, you're just not welcome. So on the one hand, we're out there fighting to have interstate driving open up for 18 to 20-year-olds, but then as an industry, we're telling them they're not welcome. And this was one of the first pages that popped up that I'm showing you here. And if you read in that circle, it says, so basically physical health and ability and being at least 21 are the main requirements when it comes to age. We're telling kids that over and over, so why would kids have any interest in our industry? If we're going to try to recruit them, we got to change our own mindset to do so. So our project purpose, we believed we need to do a better job of connecting with high schoolers. And again, promoting the image of the industry to high schoolers is going to help us with more than just the professional drivers. It's going to hopefully get more kids into diesel tech and the other ancillary careers that our industry has. We conducted a focus group that pulled high schoolers from across the state of Nebraska to learn their attitudes and feedbacks. And then we're going to use that feedback to try to polish some messaging. The methodology is we had a pre-survey group of 66 students. We took in demographic information at that point, and this was across the entire state. So we have urban areas in Nebraska that are over 1 million in population. And then, of course, we have communities that are out in the sandhills that have only a couple, 300 people. And this survey actually took in those kind of demographics all over. After parental consent was obtained, we moved on to the live virtual focus group, and that was moderated by Dr. Kelsey Medeiros from the University of Nebraska, Omaha. She is fantastic, and she's on the line too. Dr. Medeiros, thanks for being here this morning.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Just off the top of your head, any quick impressions that you want to make sure people have? We'll break down a few of the categories here, but just how do you sum up where we are now with this project?
In what regard? In terms of results or where?
In terms of results, if you were to sum up the results, to where either a motor carrier executive or another state trucking association could say, there's a future with high schoolers if we do this. Do you have any thoughts that way?
Oh, absolutely. There were a lot of really clear themes that emerged. They really liked this idea of this open space and reimagining what a career in trucking was like. We showed a couple of advertisements, kind of this big open road and, someone with their dog. And this idea that trucking is really kind of pushing the boundaries in a lot of ways and giving them this kind of different remote work experience. And so kind of speaking to those themes that we're seeing more broadly in the workplace, and we're seeing that younger people are really craving, that was coming through in this. So I think meeting them there is a really key aspect of what came forth from those.
Well, Dr. Medeiros, you jump in anytime as we go through these next few slides where we kind of break it down a little bit for the folks who are on the call. And in the meantime, if you're on the call, please, 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 if you've got a question or a comment as we go, hop onto that chat feature, the box over in whatever part of the screen it is for you. I think there's a hand waving feature, or somehow get our attention so that we can unmute you, because I think everybody is in listen only mode right now. But jump on that chat feature, please, so that we can have a discussion here as we go along. So moving forward, these were kind of interesting statistics, I thought. The question, what motivates your future career decision? Combining most and somewhat most important: salary, cost of education, providing benefit to the community. And there's one that I don't know that we are good enough about saying. Benefit to the community, the top three motivators. Benefit to the community, freedom and independent nature of the job were the strongest responses. Dr. Medeiros, any thoughts on that?
No, I think that came through in the focus group as well. Some of these, but particularly the community aspect, really having that connection to community and making an impact. I don't think the salary, the benefits came through as being important in the focus group. And the cost of education was discussed, but kind of more secondary. But definitely that benefits to the community really came through.
Dr. Medeiros, I was particularly surprised by the very bottom attribute or interest, which is technology emphasized. I mean, this classically, stereotypically, is a generation that can't put technology down, and yet our population, your sample, looks like that's not a big deal. Even though these trucks are getting very high tech, that doesn't seem to be at the top of their list by a long shot.
Yeah, it did come through differently in the focus groups than in this. I think they were really impressed by these kind of high-tech trucks, and they didn't know that it could look like this. So I think some of this might be potentially a lack of understanding of what technology in this industry is. That would be my guess at where that's coming from, because they were really impressed in the focus groups with kind of what was going on in that area and what it looked like. So I think I would take that with a grain of salt.
And I think a lot of it showed that in the pre-focus group discussions, they really had no clue that there was the technology in trucks. Their main exposure is just to see them going down the road, and to them, it still looks pretty much like the same truck that's been on the road for their whole lives, their whole short lives. But when we started talking about the technology that's in them, it lit them up in many ways. So.
Yeah, and I think that's something really important to emphasize, how this focus group was really an educational opportunity for them as well, to not just them express their ideas to y'all, but vice versa. I think for them to learn about the industry and to see, and you can kind of see that change and that shift in their perception from that pre-survey to the focus group, and this kind of aha moment that they're having.
I'll throw in a quick side note here for the other State Trucking Association folks. One of the things that the Nebraska Trucking Association did during the COVID lockdown period, and in Nebraska we never had an actual lockdown, but kids were learning from home, and those kinds of activities were taking place. We were actually doing some Facebook Live and some other live stream truck tours for a various group of students, everything from Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts all the way up through elementary kids. We had a couple of hosts, and they had 3 or 4 different cameras, and they were giving a tour of a truck. And it was wildly popular. We kept getting more and more requests for them. And the kids were asking a lot of questions about the things that are inside the truck that they had no idea were there. So if the younger ages are showing an interest in the technology that's in the truck and the environment of the truck, certainly that tells us, I think, that we need to do better for the older kids who are starting to talk about careers and making choices. And speaking of choices, this slide speaks to what's influencing kids. And I almost find it a little disturbing as a family man to see that 73% of them said that friends, family, teachers, etc., really don't influence their career choices going into the future. These are high schoolers that are expressing a whole lot of independence from the people that have raised them. And then the next one is attend some college, and that was assumed to mean in their heads that they would be taking some kind of trade training, doing a gap year, and then not attending college at all. We're a much smaller percentage, but kids are looking for some kind of educational opportunity is what we took away from that. So here's the encapsulation in order to move this along, what they liked. And Dr. Medeiros, again, jump in here if I'm misstating anything. Real people with real quotes. They don't like things that appear to be scripted. The next point, they don't like things that appear to be photoshopped. They pointed them out. They're like, oop, nope, that's fake. We don't like that at all. We want real. We want real. They do need it to be quick and easy in terms of marketing messaging. Pay and benefits are an example. Tell them quick, what's the pay? Because they're used to that 2-second interaction with a cell phone, and then they're on to the next thing, and then they're on to the next thing. Some would call it attention deficit, others call it just the way their brains work these days because they move through things so quickly. As Dr. Medeiros mentioned earlier, the making a difference, being essential. They love that essential messaging. They do want to be involved in something that makes a positive environmental impact. They are into considering their lifestyle over many other considerations. I thought this was interesting. They want to know the positive messaging about trucking. They don't want to hear trucking compared to other careers. They don't want us to say, well, trucking is better than this career, because they just want to know what's good about trucking. And of course, they really keyed in on images with women, minorities, and dogs. The dogs are popular. Kelsey, any comment on any of that?
No, that really summarizes it. That summarizes it really well. What the common themes were throughout.
Kent and Kelsey, a quick question for you as an outsider to the physical interaction. Do you sense that they had a pretty accurate impression of how much a truck driver earns? Because I'm wondering about, the pay and was important, but I'm wondering if it would have been even more influential if they understood, you can be driving at, $50,000 in your first year or two. Maybe that's not important at this point.
Well, here's what we'll get into here in just a couple of minutes, a few slides in. For those who may not have understood, we actually showed them advertising, recruiting advertising that was supplied to us by some of our members. And then we also created some based on what other of our members sent us, where they didn't want us to use their actual ad, but we recreated it in other ways. And none of that advertising that was sent to us got into specific numbers. So I think the answer to your question is no, they weren't really aware of the actual salary numbers, but there is one in particular that illustrates your point, because it talked about how much the company was putting into to pay increases. So it was a big number, and they keyed in on it. They actually noticed it and said, that's something in that ad that we like. And you'll see that one here in just a second. Real quick, what they didn't like, they don't like photoshopped images. And you'll see a couple of ads, and we'll point them out to you, where it's obvious that the image of a truck was placed in some kind of artificial background environment via a photo editing process, and they saw it, they pointed it out, they didn't like it. They want to see where the truck really goes. They want to see who the drivers really are. They hated anything that looked like it came out of a PowerPoint because they are so sick of PowerPoints by the time they graduate high school, it's not even funny. Mentioned earlier how they like positive about trucking. They don't like negative comparisons between careers. They don't want to see too many words. They don't want to say too many details. They're like, don't make us read, please. Our teachers make us read. And they don't like black and white. They want to see color in their lives. They want to see color in their environments. They want to see color in their workplace. So here's an example. This was a created image based on feedback that we got from some of our members in their recruiting ads. All in all, this one was extremely well received. They really keyed in on the woman. They keyed in on the beautiful environment. At first they said, oh gosh, I didn't even realize there was a truck there. But the dog, they all were like, oh my gosh, I could have my dog in my truck. And here's why I really point that out. A lot of our motor carriers don't allow people to have their dog or their cat in their truck with them. I understand that. But as we begin to recruit younger and younger, and that age group and that demographic responds well to it, well, you know what? We may have to change the way we think about some of those kinds of things. Next image real quick. They liked this one. They liked that long, beautiful open road. There were some that said, man, that's a long road. But they liked the natural environment. They liked the fact that the road is obviously a real road. And they did appreciate the success and happiness comes with being a truck driver. Even though it says don't always come from an office, they didn't feel like that was a negative towards any others. Any comments so far?
I think I think that language is a little it's not as harsh as some of the other ones where there were direct comparisons. It's not saying that it's bad to be in an office. It's just saying it's different. And so I think that's a key distinction to make, is that comparisons are okay, but we don't want to slam another profession.
Right. So here's one where we just showed them a recruiting ad from one of our members. They loved the image of the driver, a woman of color, really spoke to them. They hated the image of the truck with the photoshopping it into some odd looking environment. They did like the way talent is highlighted, and this is the one, Dan, in particular, where they really noticed that over $20 million in planned driver pay increases, that made them get up and take notice. The great pay and benefits, again, this is well done in terms of that quick, to the point, short messaging that makes an impression on them. So if this ad would be probably a huge success for our demographics that we were talking to, if that truck were in a real setup and appeared real to them.
I think something that's key about this one is that it really challenges the stereotypes of what a driver looks like and what driving is. And so I think that's really essential here. And that first one as well really challenges the stereotype too. And that's kind of an underlying theme, is that those that really educated and challenged their thinking about what truck driving involves and is, and who a truck driver is, were really were good ads in this.
Yeah. So in all reality, I mean, this ad probably, if we put it on a scorecard, is like a 9 out of 10. And if we could just make the image of that truck sing to them a little bit better. And basically, here's the repeated image with different messaging. And again, the kids really keyed in on the messaging, that essentialness, that, I'd be doing something that matters. I'd be making a positive impact. They did like it. They just didn't like all the Photoshop treatment. And then this next one, this is a real image. This is from 2019 when we were having the historic flooding in Nebraska. And this was out of a newspaper, I believe, here. And to a person, I think everybody on the focus group or in the focus group really loved what this said to them. And that especially the kids out in the rural areas, they were like, oh God, I remember those, and it's so awesome, and those truck drivers were so awesome. So yeah, we talked a lot about this during the pandemic. We talked a lot about the essentiality of the profession. That's a message we got to keep up. We got to keep driving that home over and over and over. Kelsey, any comments from that?
Yeah, I think the memory aspect here is key as well, right? I remember distinctly one student describing standing on the side of the road, pulling the horn, waiting for someone to honk at them, and how that was such a positive association, and they could really see that represented in that image. So again, that positive image and those positive emotions that make them feel good about trucking were key here.
You bring that up. That's something that our newer generation of drivers, I don't think they get the whole pulling the horn chain. We've heard from so many people through this process and a couple of others that people hate the fact that it seems like they do that in passing with drivers and drivers never respond. So I don't know if we need to start training drivers. Hey, when somebody gives you that signal, honk at them. They want to hear from you. It's their way of appreciating you. These went over well. Again, real drivers giving real comments, simple to the point. These worked well. And I think probably age of especially the guy in these probably helped speak to the group as well. This was an interesting set. This is where we got into the technology, the environment, and all that. The image on the right, the kind of the cutaway, if you will, the kids were like, wow, we had no idea. My gosh, look at how cool those trucks are inside. I heard at least one or two of them talk about how, oh my gosh, it's like a tiny house. That's what I want. I want a tiny house. It's what I would want to live in. That's fantastic. Now they need the reality check of living in your truck, but they did, though, as the discussion went on, they talked about it's kind of stark. It would be so much better if it had a colorful blanket and a plant and something like that in it. Well, later on, when we show the image on the left, and it had some copy around it, they really loved this image, this homey, comfortable, wow, I could really enjoy working in that kind of environment. He's got his blanket, he's got pictures on the wall, things like that.
Kent, it probably doesn't hurt that he looks a little bit like Matthew McConaughey.
I suppose that's probably true. Yeah. I'm sure, anybody with Volvo, if we had them on the call, they would appreciate the fact that that was the image that we got into. So again, good stuff out of those and the kind of imagery that they responded to extremely well. This was, telling for us here. We asked them in the pre-survey, what are your top 3 career choices at this point? Not one of them mentioned trucking, not one. They mentioned all these others, but not one of them mentioned anything in trucking. So then post-survey, we kind of circled back, asking some of those same questions. These are just a few of the pull quotes, and in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through and read them, but anyone who would like to see the details and read the pull quotes and things like that, we'd be more than happy to send you the full report. The full report also has video links directly to, we recorded everything from the focus groups, and you can watch them if you want to. Lots more details and information. So, we got back then at some point to the what if. Now we have all this information. So we've kind of got a proposed recipe moving forward. And this isn't anything that we're going to try to reach a conclusion on in this call here today. This call was meant to keep the conversation going. So what if we create shareable and customizable marketing resources to promote careers to kids? that would match the generational trends that we see proven out in the focus groups and the surveys that we've done. What if we continue this research? We try to keep up not only with the current demographic, but the demographics that come along after them. What if we deliver? We said, what if we scream and shout? Deliver a campaign that other state trucking associations could use, website, social media, whatever. And I don't just mean in one little flash of the pan. I mean on a continuing, ongoing, annualized basis. TMAF could use it, ATA could use it, motor carriers could adapt it, especially motor carriers that don't have the resources to develop, robust recruitment marketing materials. And we're kind of trying a next step here at the Nebraska Trucking Association. We're working with high schools. We've approached high school art teachers. We've approached some DECA folks, marketing students at the high school level, and say, okay, here's the results of our focus group. You create some stuff that you think would speak to yourself and to your friends about careers in trucking. We'll see where that takes us, but it might be kind of fun to see what kind of work comes out of that. So we've kind of stretched the clock here a little bit, but I do want to thank the folks at ATRI, Dr. Medeiros, and the University of Nebraska Omaha. And I got to shout him out a whole lot. My Director of Operations and Communication here at the Nebraska Trucking Association, Dave Zelnio. He's really the one that did the lion's share of the lifting and did really, I'm just coming along for the show afterwards. He's really done all the work, and he is really the best point of contact for you going forward. And there's Dave's and my email addresses. Contact Dave if you want to follow up with anything. Here's what I want to encourage everybody to do. I really need everybody at the State Trucking Association level to talk about whether or not this is useful, and then let me know whether it is. But as an industry, we really need to talk about, okay, if we really want 18 to 20-year-old drivers, how are we going to get them? What if we get the regulatory changes? Then what? We've got to have those conversations, and we got to be starting on that kind of image work now. Or we're going to continue to not have that age group, not have that demographic, continue to fight to get those mid-career changeovers in their late 20s or early 30s or even later, and we're not going to be making any headway with the driver shortage. I'm not saying the youthful driver is the solution to the driver shortage, but it can be a part of the solution. I do also want to offer an opportunity real quick before everybody goes to Dr. Medeiros. You have another survey in the works. Do you want to tell us about that, Kelsey?
Yeah, I do. I've got a survey with some colleagues that we're looking to better understand women's experience in the trucking industry. So Dave will have that information. You can contact him and he might be able to send it out to you afterwards as well. But we'd love if you could send it out as wide as possible to as many in the industry that you can, as we're really trying to understand what's going on and how we can help you better retain more women in the trucking industry.
You'll definitely want to contact Ellen at Women in Trucking. She's a huge resource in that area.
Yeah.
She is our partner in it, so that's awesome. Yeah, thanks.
So I'm not seeing any questions or anything in the chat feature. Dave, are we able to unmute everybody to see if anybody has anything they wanted to throw? Dave, are you there? Okay, I don't know what's happening with the man behind the curtain, but if anybody has any follow-up comments or questions, please let us know. Please send us your impressions and your thoughts about this project and how we might be able to work together going forward. I would love to see if we might be able to get a coalition of state trucking associations together to continue to push this kind of work forward, develop some marketing materials and some campaigns that might be of use to state trucking associations and reach the youth market. Dr. Kelsey, any closing comments? I assume you're still there.
Hey, Kent, if this is Mickey Blashfield, if I could ask a question. This is excellent insight. I never in a million years would have thought that the presence of a dog, a splash of color, and give us real photographs, not photoshopped imagery. I think it's excellent insight. One of the biggest barriers to the younger drivers, and I know it's beyond the scope of this project, but maybe ATRI has some insight as well too, is the insurance industry resistance to a younger, inexperienced driver. Typically, our members are told by their agents, no way will we do that without a documented track record. Any insights on that?
Dan, I don't know if you are still with us, but there's a couple of comments I would make. One, I totally agree with you. It's one of those other obstacles that as an industry we're going to have to attack in order to tear down. I do think the ATRI research into the safety of the young drivers is the kind of data we're going to have to influence the insurance industry as well as the regulators and whoever else and other motor carriers. The motor carriers who doubt the safety of the 18 to 20-year-old driver might change their mind when they see the data. All of that is absolutely true. Good things that we've got to attack as an industry. At the same time, our point with this project is if we're not getting them interested, then it's all for naught.
Right.
Yeah, this is Dale Bennett from Virginia. One thing that struck me was the lifestyle being mentioned as a consideration and how that matches up to the fact that lifestyle is one of the challenges we face in attracting folks to trucking. And if Dr. Medeiros has any comments about that, or Dan or you, I think that's interesting and certainly an area that we need to explore because it's important to these young people. We need to be very upfront with them about the lifestyle or make changes to ease that lifestyle concern.
Yep. Kelsey, were you still with us on that?
I can't. Oh, there we are. I'm unmuted. Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if that's a difference in a recruitment and a retention issue. They might be attracted because of certain aspects of the lifestyle, and then when they hit a certain age, that lifestyle may then become a hindrance for retention. So potentially, like you're talking about, making that clear up front. We call it a realistic job preview, and make sure they understand the pros and the cons of that lifestyle, so that they understand and potentially looking inward in the industry to, as you said, find ways to alleviate those concerns to help with retention. But that would be my guess, is that you're going to see differences between what an 18-year-old is saying, that they want and is recruiting them to when they, turn 30 or so, and they might have a different line of thought on that lifestyle and what they're wanting. That's just my 2 cents.
Well,
Yeah, I was going to say, Kent, to follow that up, I think it is interesting because you have a conundrum for those who want to see the country and get out and travel and experience, we want to talk about the lifestyle of trucking. But then for those that desire home time and don't want to be gone so much, you may have to tailor the message, or it may end up that you naturally are going to recruit according to your niche or the segment of trucking you're in, and what you do and the depth of your operation.
Yeah. Well, and ultimately, of course, a motor carrier is going to do what's best for the motor carrier, but there are some practices in the industry where the shorter haul, the getting the drivers home more, clearly motor carriers are hearing that from every demographic of driver. But if the youthful driver is more insistent on it, and you have a motor carrier who always reserves those as kind of the reward for years of service, or the more experienced driver gets the shorter haul stuff because he can be home more, depending on their recruiting needs, sometimes that might have to be flipped on its head, and you might have to say, well, my younger driver is going to have that getting home more, shorter route, and as he works up into his career, I'll incent him then to go on the road, and kind of flip how we do it. I don't know, maybe. I know we can't keep doing the same thing over and over and over, and the motor carriers just continue to throw more money into salaries. I'm glad the drivers are getting paid better, but at some point, just adding more and more pay is not going to solve the shortage.
Kent, I think it would be interesting, and this would keep Kelsey busy for the rest of her life, but I'm intrigued knowing that so many of these entry-level drivers are on these midlife crisis, second, third careers. How many of these findings among the young students, we'll call them, would resonate with these midlifers who show up? In the Kelsey's world of the Myers-Briggs test, we're all very clearly extroverts, introverts, and all these other things, but we try to self-actualize later in life, and we start to reach to other aspects of our personality. And I'm wondering if, the classic accountants and dentists in the world, if they have their midlife crisis, if they wouldn't look at this open road experience, decent pay, freedom, no boss kind of thing. We still need those entry levels, 18 to 20, but I'm wondering how useful this campaign could be for any age group, frankly. The messages, I think, are sort of age generational, I think.
I think that's really important, because we're making a really big assumption, right, that it's just mostly applicable to this group, but we haven't actually looked across those groups. And so without signing myself up for a lifetime of work, I think that's a really important question to ask and to understand a little bit more about.
If Kelsey stops taking our calls from the Nebraska Trucking Association, we'll know why. Any other comments or questions from anybody?
This is Rusty from the Trucking Association of New York.
Hello, Rusty.
I have a comment here. I know we're focusing on CDLAs, but I also know that CDLBs, an 18 to 20-year-old can get.
Yes.
That's where we think if we can get the 18 to 20-year-olds with a B license, how many companies out there are actually using A drivers in a B position, could take them away and give the Bs, a chance to get on the road and get some experience. Have we thought about that?
I know that I have had this very conversation. I sit on 2 of our community college advisory boards, and I've talked to one of our private driving schools. They're totally, they acknowledge and recognize the need to train the Class B drivers. They will also tell you they don't have the capacity to try to take on Class B training along with all the Class A training that they're doing. They can't get enough instructors. They have their own shortages. They can't get enough instructors. They don't have any Class B equipment at the community college level. Now, I think it was last year maybe is when we were able to get the change to where you could use a Class A truck without a trailer in order to do the Class B testing. That helped, especially with a couple of the private schools. But I totally agree with you. And I know there's at least one company that operates construction equipment here in Nebraska that's planning on starting its own school in 2022 because they need more Class B drivers, and the other training programs can't produce them at the numbers they need.
Kent, I think my only contribution to that is to name the research, to be or not to be.
That's why Dan is in the position he's in. Thank you, Dan. Thanks, Rusty, for the comment. Anybody else? We did go longer than what we were originally planning. We were crazy to think we could get all of this into half an hour. It means a lot to all of you from the other state trucking associations to have joined us, to paid attention to our little project we have here. I hope we can keep this conversation going. I hope we can continue to work together through TAEC or just directly with each other to take this to the next step, to actually produce some collateral materials that we can all share in. You know, we've talked a lot about TAEC, about shared resources between the state trucking associations, and hopefully this will become one of them. So again, we'll leave this contact information up for Dave and I, unless anybody has any other comments or questions. Big thanks again to Dan and everybody at ATRI who supported this project and helped move us forward. To Dr. Medeiros and the folks at the University of Nebraska at Omaha for your great work. Kelsey, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And to my guy, Dave, this is his baby that he's given birth to, so I really appreciate his efforts. Unless anybody has anything else for the good of the order, we'll sign off and wish you all the very best from Nebraska. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.